There's an incredible article about the secret life of Mullah Omar by Betty Dan. It's quite long, but it's well worth reading because it punctures a lot of the narrative around the Taliban. The confusions about the Taliban movement are perhaps embodied most strikingly in a single man, she says, Mullah Omar Omar. The group's notorious supreme leader came to the world's attention first for demolishing his country's giant Buddha statues, and then for his refusal to hand over Osama bin Laden in the wake of the September 11 attacks. Upon the fall of the Taliban government in 2001, he effectively vanished, becoming one of the most wanted men in the world, along with bin Laden. The US placed a $10 million bounty on his head, but was unable to find him. Mullah Omar is gone, but he is alive with us, and we are fighting in his name and in his spirit. The story that emerges is that the US and almost everyone else had it wrong. After 2001, Mullah Omar never stepped foot in Pakistan, instead opting to hide in his native land, and for 8 years lived just a few miles from a major US forward operating base that housed thousands of soldiers. He remained the Taliban's spiritual lodestar, a fact that may seem puzzling to outsiders, but becomes sensible when we consider his appeal in terms of the type of ascetic, Sufi-inspired religiosity common in the southern Afghan heartlands. This type of charisma was not based on eloquence or fiery sound bites, but rather by cultivating the perception of an otherworldly, selfless, guileless persona that seemed to many Talibs the antidote to the corrupted materialism around them. The contrast to the worldly Osama bin Laden could not be greater. And the author has pieced together his movements, and he was basically lived his life in small villages in the remote mountainous province of Zabul. If we spoke very softly. We put pillows and straw against the door so nobody could hear us. Often the two men, this is his minder, would only interact when washing their hands and feet in the kitchen before prayer. He didn't talk much and had stopped articulating any wishes or ambitions, Jabbar Omari said. I like this detail. He only asked for his supply of henna, which he regularly used to color his graying beard, and naswa, the local tobacco that he often put behind his lower lip. He loved being alone, recorded Quranic verses on an old Nokia telephone he kept, so he could listen to them later. He used the phone, which had no SIM card, for that purpose alone. Mullah Omar refused to make calls, Jabbar Omari told me. He didn't want to be discovered. In early 2013, he fell ill. Jabbar Omari made him shurwa soup, one of his favorite dishes, to try and re-energize him, but he could no longer eat. Passed away in April 2013. That day, Jabbar Omari told me the hot, dry lands of southern Afghanistan experienced something he'd never seen before, a hailstorm. I assumed it was hagiographic bluster, but later I found a US Army publication referring to that day. More than 80 Task Force Falcon helicopters were damaged when a sudden, unprecedented hailstorm hit Kandahar airfield in April 23rd, where nearly half of the brigade's helicopters were parked. As far as we know, Omar never attempted to actively rally his own troops after the fall of the Taliban, nor did he ever attempt to admonish the Taliban for their own crimes against civilians. And this is her concluding point, which I think is interesting. The Taliban utilized him to unify and cohere a disjointed movement, while the US policy in Afghanistan was linked ultimately to the idea that Mullah Omar and bin Laden were in league together. In this way, Mullah Omar's importance in what he represented to both sides, not in what he actually did. There's a link where I've mentioned him before, and an interview he gave to the Voice of America. And at the time when Bush was about to send the troops in, he said, "I'm considering two promises. One is the promise of God, the other is that of Bush. The promise of God is that my land is vast. If you start a journey on God's path, you can reside anywhere on this earth and will be protected. The promise of Bush is that there is no place on earth where you can hide and I cannot find you. We will see which one of these two promises is fulfilled." He also said in that interview, "America controls the governments of the Islamic countries. The people ask to follow Islam, but the governments do not listen because they're in the grip of the United States." Interesting backgrounder to that.